Willoughby. Next stop is Willoughby. I'm Mark Zickrey, and this is your Twilight Zone Minute. We are, of course, talking today about a stop at Willoughby. It's interesting because Rod Serling sometimes would write stories that were kind of parallel stories examining a similar theme. And he'd already done Walking Distance, which was his great autobiographical piece about going back in time to the Binghamton, New York of his childhood. Now in Walking Distance, he made it a more generalized story about any weary executive whose boss is going push, 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 and who doesn't feel comfortable in his own life and longs for an idyllic turn-of-the-century small town to escape into. Now, MGM, of course, was the greatest studio in the world at the time, and it had the most amazing back lot, including a small town that was very reminiscent of the Binghamton of Rod's boyhood. And I speak from authority because I just got back from the Rod Serling Fest in Binghamton, New York. And I saw Rod's boyhood home. And I mean, when you're in the park, the Walking Distance is inspired by, when you see Rod's boyhood home, you just really are aware of how well he nailed Binghamton in Walking Distance and A Stop at Willoughby. Now, Stop at Willoughby stars James Daly in a role akin to the one that Gig Young played, perhaps even a little more desperate, because after all, Martin Sloan does return to his life, albeit with a limp, whereas James Daly very much has nowhere to go if he can't get to Willoughby. And now James Daly was a wonderful actor. He starred in many great TV shows of the live era. He did a great version of An Enemy of the People. He did give us Barabbas. And he also was the father of Tyne Daly, who starred in Cagney and Lacey. In addition, James Daly would be in a terrific Star Trek episode in which he played an immortal man, one of whose aliases had been Leonardo da Vinci. So he was really utterly solid in everything he ever appeared in. And here he's great. He's great. And the fantasy, the appeal, the idea of a small town fantasy world that you could escape into is terrific. The train is great. The transition between time frames is great. And again, whereas other Twilight Zone episodes are time travel or space travel or science fiction per se, parallel dimensions, this is very, very, very much a fantasy. There is no time travel. Willoughby is not so much back in time as a fantasy realm that James Daly wants to escape into. And Rod gives us a little twist ending, which is kind of fun, kind of dark and macabre, but it's just a wonderful episode in every way. And the fun part is, he may have named Willoughby after a small town he'd known of, but also here in Hollywood, if you were driving, this is West Hollywood, if you were driving from Warner Brothers or Universal Studios in the Valley to Culver City, MGM, you would pass on a diagonal through this area, and as you saw a moment ago, one of the streets is named Willoughby, and interestingly enough, a street immediately north of it is named Homewood. And those are the two towns. Homewood was the town in Walking Distance. Willoughby, of course, is the town in A Stop at Willoughby. So it's fun to think that Rod may have been driving along one day during 1959 and looked at these two signs and thought, well, those would make good names for small towns. And there you go. So meantime, if you would like to see more Twilight Zone, hear more Twilight Zone, hear more of me, if you want to hang out with me thinking like, wow, what a great guy, let's hang out with Mark Zickrey some more, I'm going to be doing 104 episodes, Twilight Zone full episode commentaries. You can go to twilightzonecommentaries.com, find out all about it. It all begins on November 1st, so be there or be square. Do not miss out. You will not get this opportunity ever again. I am the world's expert on the Twilight Zone, and I would love to share my unique knowledge of the show with you and the 100+ people who worked on the show, actors, writers, directors, producers, etc. And of course, Rod Serling himself, whose insights and stories formed the basis of the Twilight Zone Companion when I started writing it back in 1977 when I was 21 years old. And that's about it. So thanks, guys. We'll talk again soon. And also subscribe to Mr. Sci-Fi if you haven't done so, because here is where we talk about all things science fiction, and it is a cool place to be. Perhaps not as cool as Willoughby, but definitely somewhere that I hang out a lot. Talk to you next time. Bye, guys.